Welcome to Sharing Sox, the post-trading deadline issue. We won't get into the middle of the losing. Well, we will get into that. We might mention the losing streak. I'm duty geezer Leigh Allan. With me, my son and West Coast correspondent Will, who's now at the home of such people as Michael Kopech, who in his first inning with the Dodgers struck out 3 straight people. So,
yeah,
did okay for himself. Meanwhile, though, Miguel Vargas coming to the Sox has fit right into the team because he's 0 for 8 with 3 strikeouts, and Wednesday broke the wrong way on a not routine but not particularly difficult fly ball and turned it into a double when it bounced out of his mitt. So he is right there in the White Sox family and going strong. We are recording this on Friday afternoon before the trip to Minnesota. The White Sox at this point have lost 17 in a row. And as Will pointed out, they have not won since we last did a podcast, which was some time back. So
I'm gonna real quick because I do want to talk about Vargas and Kopech, but I want to real quick just mention a few things that have happened since the White Sox won. A few things.
Okay.
There was an assassination attempt on a former president of the United States. We have not won since that, if you remember that, which I'm sure you do, which feels like it was a year ago at this point. The current president has dropped out of the re-election race. A new nominee has come into the race since the White Sox last won. The U.S. has won 41 medals in the Olympics in Paris since the White Sox last won a game. And my softball team, which won 2 games all of last season, has won 5 games since the White Sox last won a professional baseball game. How crazy is that?
Wow.
A year's worth of news and wins has occurred since the White Sox last won a baseball game.
And they have not yet made Wikipedia. Wikipedia has a page of MLB longest losing streaks because they have a page for everything. And their page includes the 19th century. And a bunch of the games are from before there was even really any organization to the leagues at all. It was kind of half the time just barnstorming. So they need another one because that list only goes down to 18 straight losses. They'll let 5 or 6 teams tied in 17th place for 18 straight losses. So the Sox need to lose tonight. This will be Friday night. They've got Davis Martin going, who is making his first start after Tommy John surgery. Probably won't go very long. And going up against Joe Ryan, who's a pretty good pitcher. That could get to 18 pretty easily.
I mean, I don't see why we can't hit 20 by the end of the weekend.
Well, it seems very possible because on Saturday, Garrett Crochet is pitching, and I want to say some things about Crochet because I'm kind of over Crochet now.
We'll definitely talk about Crochet. We'll definitely talk
because particularly what he just said in the last day or two. I mean, it's just getting worse and worse. But he's going to pitch Saturday, but he's only going to pitch. I mean, who knows, 3 innings maybe? I mean, it's going to be on a very limited pitch count. It has to be. It's only sensible. And then again, we're into the bullpen, which is missing the best multi-innings guy in the pen. Tanner Banks is gone. Incidentally, had a perfect inning for Philadelphia in his debut there. So it's up to, and I will say, Chad Kuhl has been really good in that role lately. Complete surprise that he's any good at all. But he went 5 innings against Seattle last week, 1 run. So I mean, Chad Kuhl's going to be used up on one of those 2. Soroka, I guess, is another choice. I don't know where else they go.
He who shall not be named is out for the season. That happened since the last time we've been on here as well. So we're just running out of warm bodies that can get us through 9 innings. Fortunately, we're not usually in the game still by the 7th. So let's talk about the trades that you mentioned, Tanner Banks. Let's talk about the trades that did happen, and then we'll sound off on
Okay,
Garrett.
I'm going to put a caveat in, which is I know nothing about lower level prospects. I mean, nothing. So I have no opinion whatsoever on these teenagers that they got in a lot of the trades, except that they are mostly teenagers. They may be very, very good. They may not, but they're teenagers. They're at least 3 years away. I mean, 2027, if we're lucky. So we're writing off now, as we should, 2026. That was never a realistic thing. Anyway, you could hope, well, maybe they'll only lose 90 games in 2026. But that's about the best you could hope for. They're going to be over 100 again next year and
easily
improve a little. Maybe 2027 be a 500 team. If Jerry dies tomorrow. If Jerry doesn't die in the next week or so, then we push it off another year or two. Anyhow, so this to the trades. I don't know anything about these kids they got. And I won't claim to know anything about these kids they've got. I've seen various reviews and they're all over the map. So
yeah, I've done a little bit of research on it, and it's very much like, yes, these are kids that could be good at baseball. These are kids that also could fizzle out by the end of next year. So it's not so much what we got, because I don't really think we got a whole lot to be excited about. But of course, we also didn't really give up too much. I mean, Fetty, getting a garbage return in the Fetty deal was a huge misfire.
Yeah, most of the pros are judging that as about a D for the White Sox, I think.
Yeah, I've seen D, I've seen D minus, I've seen F. I haven't seen anything above that. That was just, yeah. I don't know what was going on there. I mean, to lose Fetty and end up with Miguel Vargas and some teenagers,
kids who may be very good someday.
Who might be, but no one's necessarily predicting them to be that. So that was just a disaster. We unloaded Tanner Banks to Philadelphia, which I'm excited about for Tanner Banks.
Yes, I like Tanner Banks. I'm a Tanner Banks fan, and I hope he does real well there and gets nice postseason money.
Yeah, I hope he gets a chance to do his Tanner Banks thing that he can do from time to time, and let's say Ranger or Christopher Sanchez or someone just doesn't have it and they're out by the third, and you bring in Tanner to give you 3 or 4 solid innings of relief in a game, which is very, very possible. I mean,
and he's the anti-Crochet, both of the fact that he doesn't throw 100 miles an hour, but in the fact that you call on Tanner Banks if it's Tanner, would you get up and just go in? I haven't had any warm-ups. That's okay. Can you just go in right now? Yeah, I got it, coach. I got it. It doesn't matter. I pitched 4 innings yesterday. Sure, give me the ball. That's terrific.
Coach, I just got here. I don't even have my cleats on. I'll make do. Yeah, I love Tanner Banks. He's not a great pitcher by any means, but he's also not a bad pitcher by any means. And I think that was a really smart since they didn't really give anything up of any importance whatsoever, I think it's a really smart pickup for the Phillies, who are relying on their starters. And, we're seeing some signs of fatigue from those guys, as they're probably pretty safe in the NL East. But you never know if your starters start to wear down. A guy like Tanner Banks could be extremely valuable through September to just help you get through close games and keep you in games until the later innings when you can bring in. Obviously, Philly has some bullpen guys that are incredible. So the guy who can bridge that gap between a starter who runs out of gas or someone you want to limit their innings as you head to the postseason. I mean, they're not going to want to throw their pitching staff is so good. I'm about to list 4 guys who are incredible. Nola, Wheeler, and Sanchez and Suarez. Just guys that you want to not completely completely wear out heading into the postseason. I think that's a great pickup. And then you've got we did somehow, and now we know, but we somehow managed to move Eloy Jimenez.
Yeah, it's well, he was gone at the end of the year anyway, so it's just, he's a rental from that point of view. They were not going to pick up his option.
No.
Yeah, that they got in. It was, well, first of all, initially it was saying that he just went to Baltimore and we got back a low-level prospect. And you think, why would the Orioles do that? Because he's owed over $4 million for the rest of the year, plus $3 million in payoff for not picking up the option. And there's another $3 million in 2026, but it must be written in such a way that it doesn't count if you don't have him in 2025, because nobody's talking about that second $3 million when they're reviewing it. But then it came out just yesterday, the day before we're recording, from the AP, so totally reliable source, that the White Sox are picking up all but about 170,000 of his pay.
Unbelievable.
And half of the buyout. So Baltimore's maximum outlay is 1.7 million instead of 7-something million. The rest of that is on the White Sox. And maybe Baltimore saw, I mean, Eloy hits the ball hard. He's always in the top few percent in the majors in how hard he hits the ball. He just hits it right to the shortstop for a double play. I looked up, he's hit into 11 double plays. The major league leader is Manny Machado at 19, but if you compare their at-bats, they're almost, he said, they're within like 0.1% of the percent of times that you hit into a double play, because Eloy's also slow. So,
I mean,
maybe Baltimore saw something. Maybe they saw something that they can say, well, now we can get him to hit it in the air. Because obviously, if you hit the ball as hard as he does in the air, you're going to do very well.
I mean, when those initial reports came out, and some of them even said out loud that Baltimore was paying that tab, it was a mind-boggling question mark from that organization.
A very, very low payroll team.
It made no sense, and you and I were, of course, skeptical from the start that was the truth, because it truly made no sense. At 1.7 million, to take him from a team where you have no motivation to a team where you have a ton of motivation, I think that's a good pickup for Baltimore. It doesn't have to pan out. That's not a crazy amount of money, so it is a situation where, if you can, work with him and fix him, which the White Sox probably aren't really trying to do anymore. If you get a right-handed DH who can platoon with a lefty, if you can get him to hit 250 and hit 240 and hit a few balls out of the park, that's a good pickup for Baltimore. And that kind of brings me to Kopech, who in his new environment, as you mentioned before, came in and looked like a video game pitcher, like we always thought he was going to be.
Well, he had been for the last couple of weeks. His last 6 games before the deadline, before the trade, 1 hit total. I mean,
yeah.
And what had happened was, he was getting absolutely. He was terrible. He was terrible most of the season, which is sad because I like Michael, but he was really bad. But he was just throwing fastballs. And when they got him, and where that came from, I hope that the coaches did it, or the catchers did it, or maybe he did it, throwing cutters in an almost equal number. Then all of a sudden, he's back to unhittable again. I looked at the pitches for that inning for the Dodgers. The first batter, he was almost all fastballs. But the next 2, he was at least half cutters. I think the third one was mostly cutters. So he's mixing it up. He's got more control, apparently, more command that way. And wish him well. He should do well.
He's a guy who has such incredible raw talent as a pitcher that we've watched over the years fade in and out. Getting him to an elite pitching staff, which the Dodgers absolutely have an elite pitching staff. And there's also something to be said about having catchers that are some of the best in baseball at calling a game. I mean, you've got Will Smith behind the plate in LA, or you have Austin Barnes. And Austin Barnes is a guy who's, often hits around 100. So we like to poke fun at Austin Barnes in LA. He's hitting 280 this year. But he's great at calling games. There's a reason that Clayton Kershaw only pitches to Austin Barnes. And to get those guys behind the plate for Kopech, along with a new pitching staff on a team that is a contender. I mean, the Dodgers have been under 500 for the last 2 months, but they are still a contender. Everybody's hurt when they are healthy. Kopech could end up being a crucial part of their postseason run. And if he can stay healthy and they can keep getting him, comfortable and getting him throwing these pitches, not just fastballs, and get his confidence up, because, confidence is really key with Michael Kopech. You truly don't know, but he could be an elite late innings pitcher for the Dodgers in the postseason. Absolutely. He could be absolutely elite. When he is on, he is as good as anybody in baseball. When he is off, he is very bad. But he's got inspiration to be on now, which I think is huge. So we got Vargas for that. Vargas is essentially getting a prospect who we already know can't play Major League Baseball. He was having an okay year in LA. He was up and down. Definitely a little better than the last year. But it's kind of the reverse effect, right? Like, you're on a team with all your friends who are expected to maybe win the World Series, or at least go to the World Series. And now you find yourself in the midst of a 17-game losing streak, relocating to Chicago. I don't see a world where Miguel Vargas pays off in any way, shape, or form. Any way, shape, or form.
He fills up space that needs to be filled up.
He's a warm body. He's a very nice guy. He's a good clubhouse guy. But outside of that, I just don't see anything there. We also unloaded Paul DeJong, who had to take the long trip from the home clubhouse to the visitor clubhouse.
I was covering his first game as he played for Kansas City, going the other way. Now, here's a guy who is virtually never played third base in his life. Played a few games at the end for the White Sox, I guess, as kind of an audition. They moved him over to third for a while, and he was very bad. And he was Brooks Robinson for the Royals in his first game, charging, barehanding, and whipping it over to first, which is not a play that shortstops are used to doing, that crossbody throw stuff. And he was perfect on both of them, right? Boom, in the glove. So he may have a new life too. I think it's a new life for everybody. But interesting, Eric Fetty will tonight, the day we're recording, be in Chicago. I guess he didn't really have to go all the way down to St. Louis. He could have just stayed in town. That he'll be facing the Cubs for his first start for the Cardinals. So see how that goes. But he certainly has been playing very well, even with a lousy team. So he should be just fine.
And Pham. I'm brain farting here.
That's unreal. Pham's unbelievable. He's going to hit 900 in St. Louis.
Yeah.
I mean, forgot about it. Grand slam in his first game, 2 home runs in the next one, couple hits in the next one.
Yeah, it's those deals are looking really, really good for LA and St. Louis. Looking really, really good for LA and St. Louis. Is there anybody else we did trade that we need to talk about here?
We failed to trade Brebbia. I'm surprised that somebody didn't just pick him up for one of the 18-year-olds that are out there. Although he's been very bad lately, but
his ERA is like 6.
Yeah, I mean he's been terrible lately.
Okay, well then let's take our break here. We're right at the halfway point, and we will come back and talk about the long-armed, left-handed elephant in the room, which of course is Garrett Crochet. So hang in there, and we will be right back on Sharing Sox. Welcome back to Sharing Sox. In the first half, we talked about everyone who did get dealt. And now we're going to talk about the guys who did not get dealt. We'll start with Luis Robert, who we did not truly expect to be dealt at this deadline. If he was red hot, I think he probably gets dealt for the greatest prospect package in the history of baseball. But he is anything but red hot. And unfortunately, because, gosh, I just think, Luis, if you could get him out of this hellish organization.
Luis, I think we've learned over the years, not just, the last 2 horrible years, he's very susceptible to what's around him.
Yeah.
He kind of loses focus, understandably, when he had 2 statues on either side of him in left and right field, and he had to run from essentially foul line to foul line on every play. It just wore him out, and he just looked like, I'm done. I really don't do this anymore. And then he came back to life, and I think today this year he was putting up, hoping to get traded at the deadline, and then boom, right back into the old problem of, that's a slider 2 feet outside. I guess I might as well swing. If he goes to a team that teaches him how to recognize sliders, he's headed for the Hall of Fame. And it's not easy. I mean, a really good slider, great hitters do not hit really good sliders, but he doesn't even hit mediocre sliders. And that's a problem. But at any rate, so Luis, we didn't expect it. And Luis, this winter, we mentioned it during the last show, after Juan Soto, the outfielders available as free agents goes down to Cody Bellinger, and then a big drop off after him. So Luis will be prime person to pick up for a good team over the course of the off season.
You need 2 good months from him here. You really need 2 good months from Luis right now. And I just don't think there's any motivation. I mean, hopefully he would be motivated by the idea of, I can get out of here and go start afresh somewhere else if I power through these 2 months and play my best. But you really need a good 2 months, because the last thing in the world you want is to not get an insane deal for Luis Robert. And I just don't know right now if teams, because
you're definitely selling low,
are going to do that.
Although teams know how good he is. It's not like
they do.
Well, he hasn't been good for a month, so we'll pass on him. No, they know he's got superstar capabilities. But it'd be good to put together a couple nice months where he's showing, some thought of what the strike zone is, for example.
And teams also know that players perform this way under total dysfunction as well. So it's not like teams are looking at Luis Robert going, he's on the White Sox, he should be really good right now. They are looking at him being like, wow, we've got a 5-tool player who's stuck in the worst situation maybe in the history of baseball. I kind of get why he's not rising to an occasion that doesn't exist. So I do think that Luis has a second act written and waiting for him at some point. I just don't know when exactly it'll be and what kind of return the White Sox will get based on when that is. I mean, they're going to get something good for Luis Robert. The question is, can he show out these next couple months and get something really, 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 really good? Or are they just going to get something, really
even if he does, will Chris Getz just blow it? So there's that.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Getz, first off, he's in an impossible position. But he also probably should just leave that organization. You sent me that article that talked about that, and it would be in his best move, as that article said, to say, I'm getting out of here, and here's a warning to everyone else. Don't take this job.
We're talking about a column by Rick Morrissey in the Sun-Times this week, which was excellent, and about Jerry Reinsdorf hating the fans so much. And I think that's that. And I'm going to write about that in the next day or two to be beyond it, because Rick was talking about Jerry, and obviously he has sources that I have no possibility of getting, but about Jerry getting really, really ticked off about the sell the team stuff, which was more last year than this year. There's been less of it this year. I think it's just despair this year by the fans.
Yeah, and there's nobody there.
But I think he's hated fans forever. He's a control freak, a total control freak, and you can't control the fans. And that just has to drive him bonkers. He can control the whole organization, so it's made up totally of people who just do nothing but kiss his butt. You can't make the fans do that. And anyhow, that's a whole different thing right there. Let's get to Garrett Crochet, because we've been going for a while here. So Crochet, we expected to get traded. I think he expected to get traded. Then he came out a few days before the deadline, and I've never seen a direct quote, and I don't know if it came originally from his agent or from him, but it was, "I expect to be a starter." And he had good explanation actually for that, about how the 5-day routine really works for him, and he does his sideline stuff 2 days in. And actually, I think teams wouldn't be bothered by that, because making him a starter does not making him pitch 250 innings. You could make him essentially an opener. And he could pitch every 5th day and go a couple of innings, and you would have him, and then maybe stretch him out toward the end of September so he's really ready for the playoffs. But then he came for that, and I won't pitch in the playoffs unless I get an extension. Okay, first of all, he's under a contract. He can't.
But I believe, but for to hit your first point of this, I don't think it was just I expect to be a starter. I think it was I'm not pitching in the bullpen.
I think you're right. Yeah, I need
to keep my starter routine for my health. Like, we have decided I need to be a starter for my health, which is a bad sign. So you have to break that one down as well, because yes, there is some validity potentially to that. But as soon as a starter says that, a starter who has no right to say that, because no one has a right to say that.
Well, there are guys whose contracts may say that, but his contract doesn't. He's on his original contract.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. Unless it's in your contract, you have no right to say that. That's a huge red flag, because if you are saying, for my health, I have to be a starter, then the second a team says you're moving to the bullpen, he's got every out in the world to say that I'm hurt, to say that my health is not there. And that is going to make teams balk. They're going to be like, oh, so we've got a total freaking head case who's going to come in here. We need him to move to the bullpen. He said he won't move to the bullpen. And when we try to move him to the bullpen, all of a sudden his lower back hurts. That is a huge red flag, especially given what happens when we get to the second point, which is the more egregious point. Which is what you were starting to say, I will not pitch in the postseason without an extension.
Ken Rosenthal had the best write-up on that, where he said, can you imagine he goes to the Dodgers and he tells Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, and Shohei Ohtani, and Clayton Kershaw, I'm not with you. They didn't cross my palm. I'm not working in the playoffs. Hey, send my playoff money to this address here, and here's my ring size in case you win the World Series.
Clayton Kershaw, you're telling that to Clayton Kershaw, who himself is on a 1-year deal, and you're going to go in there and say, I've never met you guys. I hear you're good, and I wish you well. But if I don't have a contract extension, I am just sitting on the bench throughout this entire postseason run, which also, as an athlete, as a baseball player, it's just a pathetic mindset to begin with. To go to a contender and say, I'm not going to pitch without an extension, but I can't. Here's my ring size. It's just absolutely the opposite of the mentality of these real gamers. Obviously, it's the opposite of the Tanner Banks mentality, but it's the opposite
of Burley mentality. Mark Burley's out there. I can do a relief inning for you here.
I mean, look at guys
Send
like
me to the
Madison
bullpen. I mean,
Bumgarner.
Hurley sat in the bullpen for the World Series in the games he wasn't pitching.
Bumgarner pitched in the postseason.
Before all this, I have no reason. I don't know anybody had reason to think that Crochet was an arrogant jerk. He just seemed like a normal guy, perfectly nice guy, and wanting to do well. But then it's followed up. He had chances that, and easily could be misinterpreted what he said. He says that we all say dumb things. He's 24, 25 years old. We all said really, really, really dumb things when we were that age. No, I didn't mean it that way. What I meant was,
even though it can't really be misinterpreted, you can still say it can be misinterpreted.
Yeah.
And you can backtrack and say, sorry, this is what I meant. I meant I want the next team I go to be my new home. I want to dive into a new fan base, a new franchise. I want it to be my next place. I want it to be the place that I'm going to play for a while.
And I want to be confident I'll be healthy to do that for years to come.
Yes, that has the total opposite effect of what he did. You say something like that, and a fan base says, and you come in and have a good first outing, a fan base is going to be like, extend him. They are going to be on Twitter saying, you got to extend him. You got to extend him. But to come out and not backtrack it, and then...
And he was interviewed. He had interviews on a couple of days where he had plenty of chances to say, no, certainly I wasn't going to refuse. That's just silly. I have no right to in the first place. And secondly, I wouldn't want to. What an opportunity. He could get that. So that goes through all that, and he doesn't get traded. Well, I mean, he couldn't get traded. Already, he was going to be of minimal use to a team during the rest of the regular season. They were going to have to space him out and use him very sparingly. We know that because he's, pitched like 8 times as much as his entire lifetime. But then he came back just in the last day or two and made the comment, my saying that had nothing to do with the fact I wasn't traded. How could he even... Okay, possibly. Has he talked to all 29 other general managers? They all said, "Oh, no, kid, we really wanted you, but they were just asking too much." No, it had everything on the planet to do with the fact that he wasn't traded.
I mean, Getz came out and said, "I was blindsided by this." So if your own GM is coming out and saying this messed it up, kid, it messed it up because that's the guy who's on the phone. That's the guy who's talking to these teams. And you went from a guy who was, I would say, had a 90% chance of being traded, maybe more. And all of the sudden, he is not traded and he is stuck in Chicago. To say that what you said had no effect on what happened is delusional, is borderline insane. I just don't... I don't know if it's bad guidance. I don't know if he's just really, really stupid. I can't pass judgment on that. I will say at times he doesn't have the appearance of an intellect. But that's not to say that he's stupid.
You have to be intellectual to have the brains to understand the game of baseball. And he may be. I mean, for all we know, he's in Mensa. But
true.
He could be too understanding smart. Of what's going on was screwed up. Really screwed. And then he in the winter, we mentioned that, Luis has almost no competition from free agents in the winter. So his value goes up. It's the opposite for Crochet. It's like half the great pitchers in baseball are free agents at the end of this season. There's a difference between free agency and trading, but the teams that have money and spend money are going to be looking at the free agents too. So
the other thing that's so delusional about this, like you mentioned going to the Dodgers and Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, those guys being like, who are you? What are you talking about? If you go to any of those teams, if you let's say realistically who's probably going to go to the Dodgers or the Yankees, you go into that clubhouse as a pitcher, you are not even remotely the ace of the staff. It's not like you're going to a team where they need an ace and you're the ace that they're bringing in. I mean, the Dodgers bring in Jack Flaherty, and when the team is healthy, he's the 4 or the 5. if the Dodgers staff is healthy, Crochet comes in, he's the 4 or the 5 in that pitching rotation. And then you go to New York and you think, oh, you're not the best Garrett on the pitching staff in New York City. You are the second best Garrett. It's just crazy to have that kind of attitude. You're going to go in there and all of a sudden think that you get more save than Tyler Glasnow, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Clayton Kershaw. It's just cuckoo to think that you can have that kind of sway. And it really shot him in the foot. It shot the White Sox in the foot. I don't think it's going to go over well with the fan base moving forward at all. I think it's going to create a slightly, off-putting vibe, as the kids would say, with White Sox fans, that we weren't able. It's kind of tricky because, we're mad because we couldn't get rid of you, is kind of a weird thing. But fans get mad about that. Fans get very mad when you are the absolute worst team and someone does something to make it even harder for you to win in the future. And Crochet is a huge question mark. He's a huge question mark. There is no part of me that says, oh, we keep Garrett Crochet. Garrett Crochet is going to be good for 5 years. We have no clue. We have no clue. He could end up with a second Tommy John any second now. So I just think this was the absolute biggest mistake in the whole deadline across all of baseball. It's the only time I've ever felt kind of bad for Getz because it just absolutely destroyed his leverage. It made him look like an idiot, which is another thing you do not want to look like during the trade deadline when you're dealing with Brian Cashman and Andrew Friedman. You do not want to look like the GM who does not have his situation under control. You just do not, and especially with those two guys. You don't want to look like that. It was a huge, huge disaster. And for Crochet to come out and say, I don't think it had any effect on it. I mean, you got to be kidding me, man. You got to be kidding me. That is just
I don't think he even said, I don't think it had an effect. I think he said it didn't have an effect. He has no idea. Maybe it did. Maybe nobody wanted him anyway. But, I think people wanted him until that came up.
We know that there were offers for him early on that were, I'm sure, lowballed because of when they were happening. But we know there were offers. There were offers in from the Dodgers. There were offers in from the Padres. And now you're staying in Chicago.
From the Yankees.
And from the Yankees. So that's 3 teams where you had the chance to pitch in the World Series. And instead, you decided to make this work for everybody. All right, let's move on. We're running out of time. So let's just take a quick glance here at what we have coming up. So we know that we are going to be taking on Minnesota for 3 games in Minnesota. That is quite ripe, I would say, for a potential sweep. We do have Martin, and then we have Crochet for a few innings tomorrow, and then Flexen, which is not really gonna, do much of anything. And then you go to Oakland for 3 games. You certainly have a chance to win some games against Oakland. Oakland is not very good. They are obviously not as bad as the White Sox, because no one is. But they are not very good. Then you're going to have the 2 games against the Cubs. You got 2 games against the Cubs. Crochet will pitch probably Friday, at least for a few innings. But of course, the Cubs are not very good, but they are playing. No, they're going to be a guaranteed rate. But it doesn't matter. It's going to be a home game for the Cubs. And then it gets hard again. It gets really hard again. You got New York at Houston, at San Francisco. Then you're going to play a Detroit team who's better than you. Then you've got Texas, who's still trying to hang in there. You've got the Mets, who are surging. You go to Baltimore. You go to Boston. And then you have Cleveland. That schedule is brutal. brutal, absolutely brutal. I don't know. I think the record is well within reason. Within reason.
Yeah. I mean, last time I believe I predicted 119 because they just disappointed us. They would disappoint us by not making history. You were saying 121. Fangraphs I looked at this morning. They're predicting 115 now. They've been very slow to stretch it out. Same thing for Pacoda.
Yeah. I saw that they were both in 115. I think I saw one had him at 116. That's the highest I saw. Or it had it at a 115.8 or something.
Pacoda does tenths, so yeah. But so anyway, I think what's going to happen, they're going to disappoint us again because obviously if they lose all the games in Minnesota, that would be at 20. The American League record is 21. The Major League record is 23 for consecutive losses. So sometime in there, they probably will win the first game in Oakland and not even get the American League record. So we can't say that we were there watching for this whole thing, for the record. So, they're really bad, but they couldn't set a record. That's about as far as it goes. I'm predicting that they'll, and I don't know who's pitching the first game in Oakland. Cannon probably, and he's been pitching pretty well lately. So I think it'll end there.
I don't think we're going to set the consecutive loss record. I don't. I just with the Oakland games, it just doesn't seem. And the Cubs. I mean, they could take one of two from the Cubs. I personally have my eye. I really need them to just tank because there is a world where I could see them in Anaheim or in San Diego break the record, and I really want them to be close enough to do it so I can head to one of those two ballparks and see this happen in person. That would just be an absolute delight. What a rare treat to have the White Sox on the West Coast for potentially now they do still have 6 games after that, so they have to really tank to get to the record by that point.
Yeah, I think you're pushing it. I think the record comes now because I happen to be scheduled to work the next to last game of the season, which is at Detroit. I think that's the one. I get to work the record breaker. That's what I feel now.
That would be really cool. Yeah, I think if it can happen, while they're on the West Coast, it's probably not till September 22nd at the Padres, the last game that they're out here. Their schedule at the end is pretty weak. So that's my only concern about them. They finish with Oakland at home, and then they're going to Anaheim. Anaheim's terrible. Mike Trout's out for the year. They're going to lose all 3 to the Padres, I think. But then they get Anaheim in Chicago, and then they go to Detroit. So that they're going to have to lose a ton of that tough stretch, which they will. But they're going to have to lose like a ton.
Yeah. You remember that when you're trying to lose 121 games, you have something like you win 3 out of 4, even by accident. Because baseball is a funny game. Ball bounces funny, you win the game against a good team. You win 3 out of 4, and it really messes up the percentage of something fierce. I mean, you then got to lose. You got to lose like 8 in a row to get back on track.
Yeah, I mean, winning a series
because we've proven that.
Yeah, right. So it's definitely possible. I don't know that it's probable, but it's definitely possible. So we will leave you with that uplifting thought, White Sox fans, that it is possible we will be the worst team in the history of baseball. Do you have any final thoughts before we sign off here?
No, I strongly believe that before we do another podcast, they will have won a game. I think probably 2.
I think you're right. So we will see you next time when the White Sox are on a potential hot 2-game winning streak, maximum 1-game winning streak, more likely. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time right here on Sharing Sox.